Welcome back to Physiology Unraveled, the career series. I am your host, Jorge Granados, here with my co-host, Dr. Joe Watso. Today, we're joined by Dr. Savannah Parker, a senior medical science liaison, also known as an MSL. She is also the creator of MSL Insights, an educational resource helping aspiring students and healthcare professionals learn more about the MSL career. In this episode, Savannah breaks down what MSLs actually do, how she transitioned from clinical pharmacy into the pharmaceutical industry, and what skills helped her stand out in this highly competitive field. We also discuss work-life balance, territory management, AI tools for scientific learning, and practical advice for anyone that's interested in breaking into the MSL role. If you're exploring different career paths beyond traditional clinical or academic roles, this episode is for you. Let's jump into the conversation with Dr. Savannah Parker. Savannah, thank you for taking time on a busy weekend to speak with us and share some of your insights on your career, kind of your pathway into becoming an MSL. So give us a quick, brief intro on who you are, what you do, and describe the MSL role.
Absolutely. Well, thank y'all both so much for having me. I'm very happy to be here. I do need to start off with a quick disclaimer. So, any experiences or views I express are my own. They're not, representative of the company I work for. But yes, so I am a medical science liaison. Currently, my background is in pharmacy. So I have my pharmacist license, my pharmacy degree. After I graduated in pharmacy school in 2019, I served as a biologic coordinator for a bit in a rheumatology and dermatology clinic. Got some great experience there. And then after that, I was very fortunate and got hired by Eli Lilly to be a dermatology medical science liaison. Worked there for a couple of years. It was a lot of fun, learned a lot of good things. And then I made the transition over to Sanofi, who I currently work for now. And again, I stayed in the dermatology therapeutic area. So just continued that to my new company. But I love the role. It's definitely a change from, the traditional pharmacy practice that most people think of. I like to think of MSLs as scientific educators because our main role is going to be educating KOLs, which are our key opinion leaders, on the molecules and medications that we represent. So that definitely encompasses the main part of my job. But like you said, we wear many hats. We have internal things that we have we're responsible for in addition to our external things. So yeah, we wear many hats, but it's a great job.
Yeah, thank you for that brief explanation. You said it right there, right? We're educators. One of the things that we like to ask is what got you interested in science, right? I mean, what drove you to, one, become a pharmacist, I guess? Before even transitioning to the MSL role, what was the trajectory? Did you always know that you wanted to do that? And then the other thing is, why dermatology?
Yeah, no. So great questions. Honestly, I mean, going all the way back to elementary school, both math and science were always my favorite subjects. That continued on through middle school and high school. I always did lean more a bit towards math. And so after I graduated high school, I figured I would go the business and accounting route. And I did that my freshman year. Figured it wasn't for me. I mean, numbers were great and everything, but I don't know. I did miss the science aspect a good bit. My sophomore year onward, I was originally in biology, but then I transitioned to pre-pharm because I went to pharmacy school at ULM, and they had a great pre-pharm program. And yeah, that's kind of what I guess led me to my decision to know what I didn't want to do, which was focus just on math, but have more of that scientific aspect. I also knew I really wanted to be involved in patient care, and I live in West Monroe, Louisiana. And so I'm very fortunate because the ULM College of Pharmacy is just right next door to me. So it was a no-brainer that that's what I wanted to do. I could be involved in patient care, have the math and science aspect, and so that's kind of what led me to my decision. But from like the MSL standpoint, I really didn't get a lot of industry, in knowledge during my time in pharmacy school. That really came on during my pharmacy residency. I did forget to mention that after I graduated from pharmacy school, I did a PGY1 pharmacy residency at Baylor Scott& White in Temple, Texas. It was an
Okay.
inpatient pharmacy residency, so just on the inpatient side, but my residency program director, his wife, she was working for Pfizer at the time in their medical affairs department, and that's kind of how I heard about the MSL role, got introduced to it. But what happened was, COVID happened because, my residency year ended in June of 2020, and so at that point, I was just looking for a job, but I was very fortunate, and Baylor Scott& White started their new specialty clinic embedded pharmacist, program where they were putting clinic pharmacists into their specialty outpatient clinics, and so like I said, I work specifically in the rheumatology clinic, And it
Okay.
really was a lot like a biologic coordinator type of role, except with a more clinical aspect. So we got to do new start injection training, new start counseling, things like that. But we dealt with all things insurances. So, getting the medications approved, free drug approvals, appeals, all that fun stuff too. But it was during that 2 year span when I was in that role, that clinic role, I decided, I think I would be a good fit for the MSL role because I love, education. I love teaching. I have my teaching certificate from Texas A&M that I got during my residency program. And so, yeah, I just figured I could be a good fit. And so, yeah, I figured why not go ahead and try for it. And I was very fortunate and, was able to break into the field. So it's been good so far.
That's awesome. Go Aggies, by the way. I think we
Uh,
talked about this in one of the calls that you and I had before, right? We might have kind of overlapped at the same time while I was starting my PhD at Texas A&M.
right.
So before I give the floor to Joe, first time I learned about the MSL role, a previous collaborator of mine, a good friend of mine now, he went on to become an MSL, and he came back to give a talk at Texas A&M. Actually, did you know anything about the MSL role prior to seeking the MSL role?
That's such a good question. Because honestly, it's almost a full circle moment. So I kid you not, during my P1 year of pharmacy school, I was taking an intro to pharmacy class like we all do. We had, in the class, it was talking about the different pathways you could take as a pharmacist. And on my little piece of paper, it had liaison. And I was like, what is this? What is a liaison? What does
Yeah.
that mean? And so at the time, I was like, oh, that's nothing. But then fast forward to my residency year. So, 4 or 5 years later, got, a great view into like the work life balance and what it looked like from my RPD's wife. And she was so wonderful and sweet. And just, seeing her lifestyle and what she was able to do and how fulfilling the job was for her, that was so great to see. And so, anyway, that kind of started me on my own journey of doing a lot of self research and looking more into the role to see the steps I would need to take to break into the career because, it's a very competitive field to break into. And one step I decided to take to kind of help myself was, going back to school and getting my MBA. So, I did that during my time at the Baylor Scott& and White Rheumatology Clinic. I decided to go ahead and go back to school. I went back to school online with LSU Shreveport and, got my MBA, and I feel like that kinda helped set me apart a little bit. Because full disclosure,
Hmm.
I did talk about my MBA a lot, during my interview with Lily, and so I felt like that kinda helped give me a leg up. So, that was
Interesting.
one little extra step I decided to take to help me, break in.
Thank you for sharing that. And I know there are several MSLs that have gone in to get their MBA either while they're in the current role or prior to, kind of as you mentioned. So, but
Yeah.
Joe, I know you have some questions.
Yeah, my question, your answer was perfect because I was actually going to ask about the MBA, sort of where that fit along the training trajectory. So I'd be curious to hear your perspective on how did you know or why did you select an MBA in particular to sort of advance your competitiveness for an MSL role? Was it based on sort of what you had heard about the role or viewed it as something that would help work towards jobs like an MSL in case the MSL wasn't able to be sort of a something that you're able to secure in the near future?
Yeah, so yeah, great question. Honestly, it was kind of multifaceted. So I did do it because I thought it would give me a leg up, help differentiate myself from other people looking to break into the role. So that was one of the main reasons. Another reason, though, was again almost a full circle type moment because I started out in business my freshman year of college, and it was always just a goal of mine to kind of finish that and go back and get that business degree. So that was another reason. But, I just figured why not? And I had a couple of great companies who offered really great education reimbursement programs. And at the time, I had nothing but time on my hands because it was right during the COVID shutdown and post COVID. So I figured why not go ahead and further my education a bit. And I know kind of the debate on whether to get an MBA, like if it's valuable or not, is a bit of a hot topic. And, I truly think it is. I don't think you can ever go wrong with more education. I think it's just going to make you a better, more well rounded type of person, regardless of what area you go into. So that's kind of why I decided to go the MBA route. And I'm really glad I did. So yeah, I think it was a good decision.
That makes sense. I'm curious from that sort of lifelong learning perspective, is that something you sort of alluded to that in your background with interest in math and science early on? And I guess, was that the case earlier on? And then would you sort of view yourself now as having that kind of mindset? And is it a requirement or something that benefits most MSLs? So people in this role, if they want to do it, is it a good fit if there's someone who does think like that? That is a good sign that they would be a good fit for this type of a role?
Oh yeah, that's a fantastic question. And absolutely. So if you're a lifelong learner, I think you would fit great in the pharma industry and in the MSL role in particular, because not only are we responsible for knowing our own company's, pipeline molecules, approved drugs, those types of things, but we're also responsible for knowing our competitors and their data. So, and so that means we have new data, new studies, everything just coming at us all the time. And so, yeah, being a lifelong learner and always willing to learn new things and always being willing to stay on top of the data, that is very important from an MSL job perspective, because everything is always changing. The landscape is always changing. So yes, yeah, being a lifelong learner is very important. And I will say too, I do consider myself a lifelong learner. I also decided to go back to school again. I'm currently in school to get my MHA degree, so that's kind of on the table for me now. Again, that's mainly due to the fact that the company I work for, they offer a great education reimbursement type of program. So I'm a huge proponent of that. If you have the time and the finances to do it, especially if it's getting reimbursed, why not? So yeah, being a lifelong learner is very important. Even in my MHA degree versus like my MBA degree, I'm learning, so many differences between just like the general business type of acumen versus like the healthcare type of acumen. And it's just great to kind of see and those differences and measure between the two. So yes, to your original question though, being a lifelong learner is exceptionally important for an MSL.
Yeah, that's good to hear. I understand that the MBA has been completed and you're in the MHA program now. I guess if someone was thinking about trying to make themselves more competitive, would you have, at least at this point in time, sort of a hint of, I have some money to invest, I have some time. Should I do one or the other? Which would make me not necessarily just more competitive for an MSL role, but thinking about what you do in your role and what others in your sort of department or group work with. Do you find one more helpful than the other if you were to sort of advise someone who is looking to advance their education a little bit for that last little push before applying?
Yeah, so I think the MBA route would probably be best if you're wanting to enter the pharma industry, especially from the MSL perspective. It's just great to have like the true business side of things, the business side of your mind working. So I think the MBA would be best. But if you wanted to go be say like medical value evidence and outcomes liaison type of position, that type of role, maybe an MPH degree would be much more your style because you're focusing more on pharmacoeconomics, those types of things. And so an MPH degree, I think, would be a lot better for value evidence and outcomes type of role, which is very similar to an MSL type of role, just with some slight tweaks. You mainly talk to payers versus the KOLs, the providers, and things like that. But yeah, that's a great question. I think an MBA is just will set you up beautifully for any role in pharma, but depending on the role you want to go to, whether it be an MSL, value evidence and outcomes, maybe an APP liaison type of role. Yeah, you probably need to differentiate which one you want to choose. And I do think the MBA is a great one to start off with versus more like an MH or an MHA.
Got it. And I'll kick it over to Jorge here, but I have one more question, a little bit leading towards your key performance indicators. And this is something that I had asked Jorge as well, thinking about your goal and effectiveness in the role includes a lot of education. And presumably the physicians are not being quizzed on the information you provide to them and sending that to your company to say how effectively did you educate them. So I guess with broad strokes, we'll probably dig into it a little bit more, but what are the key types of performance indicators that MSLs have? And what are the things that help make somebody good at meeting those objectives?
Yeah, so the main one you're gonna find at most pharma companies is the number of interactions you have per specified time frame. So a common one is gonna be per month, per quarter, per year. I've also seen it per day. So that will be company specific, and it's also gonna be therapeutic area specific. Because I know just within our own company, within the different therapeutic areas, we have different metrics, at least from that perspective. So, but yeah, that's probably gonna be the main one you're gonna see. But that brings us to the second part of your question, an important skill to help you meet those metrics, whatever they may be. Territory management is very important for an MSL. So what do I mean by territory management? I mean by making sure you're organized in how you approach your territory, and you almost want to treat your territory like your own business. I was told that when I first started as an MSL, and it's very true. Like your territory is, your business, and you're running your business. So you do that by making sure you're emailing your KOLs in an appropriate time frame to set up meetings. Whenever you're going to a certain area, like my biggest area is going to be New Orleans, make sure you're making the most of your time down there by scheduling meetings with as many people as you can within an appropriate appropriate time frame. But, again, just making the most of your time. But then again, you also have to balance things like your conferences and travel, scheduling travel for those things, and so a lot goes into territory planning but organization is a key skill to have in the whole territory management plan. You always really need to be thinking at least a quarter ahead. So at least at 3 months ahead to get your meetings scheduled, meeting plans, travel plans done for conferences or internal meetings or, things like that. So organization and territory management are huge and very important in order to meet your metrics for, whatever the company requires.
Awesome. Yeah. So what I'm hearing is organization, careful planning, and having a good read or scope or understanding of who the folks you need to stay in touch with and maintaining good lines of communication.
Yes. Yeah. Communication is very important. I will say, in addition to the scientific acumen probably being the most important aspect of the MSL role, it's our ability to communicate and form relationships with KOLs because, communication is how we convey the data and, and among other things like plan appropriate meetings on an appropriate time frame. So yeah, communication is huge, very important. One thing I do like to tell people though is that a lot of people I don't think realize this, but listening is such an important part of communication. In fact, I did just see something on LinkedIn and it said communicating is 80% listening and 20% talking. And I feel like that is very, very true. Because as long as you're listening to the KOL or you're listening to your managers who are telling you what to do, you're going to meet your metrics, you're going to meet the needs of the KOL, but that listening aspect is so important in this job.
Thanks.
That
Yeah,
that
that's helpful. Go ahead, Jorge.
I was just gonna say that's a perfect segue into kind of what I was wanting to bring up. But great questions, Joe. I think you're gonna be an expert in the MSL role. I think you should come and join and become an MSL yourself. Savannah, you're bringing up a lot of skills to have, and which ones are important. Going back to the metrics, right, and talking about the number of interactions that you're having with these physicians, KOLs, and so forth. From your personal opinion, because depending on the company, as you alluded to, the metrics are going to be a little bit different. How do you feel about, I guess, the metrics being more the numbers that you should have or the quality? Like you were saying, it's important to build those relationships that are going to be long lasting, that you can keep going back to these doctors and so forth. Do you feel like more companies should focus on that quality measurement, building those relationships, as opposed to maybe you need to have 30, 40 meetings in, I don't know, in a month or so forth? And I just kind of throwing those numbers out randomly, but how do you feel about that?
Man, that is such a great question and such a hot topic in the pharma industry right
Yeah.
now. I mean, truly in an ideal world, I think we would want to have, more of a qualitative measurement of the metrics. But I don't think we have a good way to measure that qualitative impact yet, unfortunately. So
Yeah.
a lot of companies fall back on the quantitative metrics. So the number of interactions you have per quarter or per year, which is understandable. But yeah, definitely quality interactions. So, having those long, in-depth scientific discussions about what the provider thinks and getting insights from them. Those are definitely going to be, higher in quality. But all that to say, unfortunately, I just don't think we have a good measurement for the quality
Yeah.
type metrics yet. But let me turn that question back on you since you're an MSL. I would love to know what your thoughts are.
I agree with you 100%. It is difficult to have that measure of the quality, right, of the relationships. But I guess if you really look at, how many times you're going back to those KOLs, then that kind of evens itself out, right? Because the KOLs are not going to want to meet with you if they're not happy with your previous interactions, right? Their time is very valuable. Everybody's time is valuable, of course, and they're so busy that if they don't value the interaction that you previously had with those KOLs, they're not going to want to meet with you again. If they do, then they're going to make time. So as whenever I first started my role, that's you talked about mapping the territory. I was trying to, okay, I got to get this many meetings and this many, and I felt like maybe one of the things that I could have done better is been more relaxed on, hey, okay, it's gonna be more important for me to have a good quality meeting as opposed to me just kind of trying to rush and fitting as many meetings as I could to try to meet my numbers and so forth. Now, follow-up questions on territory mapping. I saw, it's been a while back, I guess, that you posted on LinkedIn. You had some videos of your a day in the life of an MSL, and you had videos of you getting up at 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning, going to the airport, flying, arriving, and getting to the hotel. And I thought that was really, really interesting. So maybe you want to tell us a little bit more about that. And by the way, if you're not following Savannah on LinkedIn, and you definitely should, she puts a lot of a lot of good content and really good resources, by the way, which we'll get into here in a bit. Yeah, I guess what is a day in the life of Savannah as an MSL?
Oh my goodness. Well, that is so kind. Thank you. Really, thank you for saying that. But no, yeah, that video, those videos I posted so far, they were really fun. I do have some more coming, but conference season for me was during October, November, so things have been pretty crazy. But I do have some future ones coming. But yeah, no, really, I started posting videos like that because that's one of the most commonly asked questions I get. I'm sure you get the same, Jorge. Like,
Yeah.
what does a day in the life of an MSL look like? And the beautiful thing about it is they're all different. And truly, like, I've never had a job, and I worked several jobs, and I've never had one where every single day is truly completely different. I mean, you have your days where you have your KOL visits planned, your regular territory type of visits. Then you have your conference days, and then you have your specific travel days to the conferences, home from the conferences, travel without around your territory. And then, of course, you have your admin days when you just stay home and do admin work like expense reports and planning for future trips and making sure your flights are booked on time, things like that. So yeah, every single day that you have as an MSL is going to be different. And then when you accompany that with, the demands of having a family, like say your child is sick or something, you have to stay home and take care of him. That's one thing I absolutely love about this role because you have such a freedom to do that. And I know I've had to just say, hey, my son is sick. I have to reschedule this meeting, or I have to just call in sick, use one of my PTO days and just stay home with him. And the autonomy to do that is it's incredible. So yeah, I love it that the MSL career allows you to have such a variety in your day-to-day life, and it also gives you such flexibility in, how you spend those days. To me, it's the best part of the job.
That's a perfect description. I really liked how, you talked about the benefits and the flexibility, and it does get very busy, right? But then you also have some
Mhm.
downtimes that you're able to, as you mentioned earlier, you're kind of the business owner of your territory, right? It is your own, you're running it. You're running your small little company, I guess, if you want to put it that way. And so you talked about the day in the life as an MSL. What is a day, and I guess the day in the life of Savannah, the mother, the just your own personal thing, without going into a lot of details, but how do you take advantage of your days off? Obviously, have to do a little bit of work-life balance. And how does that
Mhm.
impact, you alluded to, right, having the flexibility, how does that impact your work? So,
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I'll be honest, being a mother and balancing a family, it's going to be hard regardless of what job or career you have. But, I will say the MSL career, it just offers such flexibility and autonomy to make your schedule how you want it. So, I have a great example for this. So, the daycare my son uses it keeps to our school system schedule. And so, with that saying, he does not have a daycare during the summer. We have a babysitter come in, during the summer and watch him while I work from home. But what I've done in the past and what I usually continue to do is I schedule my conferences and my big time KOL meetings usually in the first quarter of the year and the last quarter of the year coupled with like the second half of the third quarter of the year. But I do that to coincide with the school schedule. So the two big months of the year, June and July, those are the summer months. I'm pretty
mhm.
much home for the majority of those months. Now, I will have like a day trip KOL meeting here and there. Well, I cover Arkansas and Louisiana, and so it's nothing for me to drive up to Little Rock and back home for a lunch or a meeting, something like that.
Yep.
But with this job, I have the power to kind of make my schedule. Like you said, it's busy, but you can make the busy be where you want it to be. And so for me, October is a very busy month. March is a super busy month, but it totally evens out because I'm going to be here for the majority of the summer when my son is home and needs me. So I just think that's the best aspect of the job.
No, thank you for sharing that. So, Joe, I
Yeah.
see you might have a question or so. I saw you jotting down some notes.
Yeah, it was insightful to hear about sort of day in the life and different perspectives, and not to necessarily come from a negative angle, but I guess thinking about roles are different for different people. Are there things that you find that you would suggest to others that don't like certain aspects of the job? Like, what do you think would be the key barriers for things that people would not expect? An obvious one, as an example, might be someone who likes to have a schedule and sort of likes to be told, this is exactly what you're supposed to do. This is exactly how your week is going to look. And maybe they don't prefer to have that autonomy or so much flexibility in that it makes them unsure of how they should spend their time. So I guess just like kind of raising the other side of it, like what types of things should people be aware of as things that could be, I guess, barriers or things they may not enjoy about the job?
Yeah, no, that really is a great question. And when people ask me about the MSL career, I do try to definitely be even keeled with how I answer it because that's true. Sometimes we need to come look at things from a negative viewpoint to make sure we're looking at it evenly. And you bring up a great point. So if you like a set schedule, you're 9 to 5, I know what I'm doing every day, then no, you're probably not going to like this job. Another thing that's definitely a negative that comes with the MSL job, and we are going to pivot here a bit, but it's, with layoffs and job security, that's a huge concern from a pharma industry perspective. So, I mean, we've all heard of the Novo Nordisk layoffs, and then we just saw BMS, decide to dismantle their dermatology team. And so, the job security that comes with being an MSL, as well as other areas in pharma, it can be very scary. I feel like it's definitely a job. You have to take one day at a time, one month at a time, one quarter of a time. And because, it just fluctuates. It fluctuates depending on how drugs are doing, on how long their patent lives are, depending on the company's CEO, what therapeutic area he or she might want to go the direction in. So, job security can be a big concern with this type of role. And so if you're not good at kind of balancing that while also balancing, oh, hey, I need to be planning my visits 3 months in advance, that's kind of tough to do. So yeah, if you're not comfortable doing that, then you probably won't like this job either.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's helpful. Just think about there's a lot of different people with different preferences. But on the other hand, going back sort of to the positive side, where do you view your role as having the most impact? Because you sort of alluded to your excitement and uh, your interest in education and personal development and professional development. What are some of the things that you think about as far as your impact on, I guess, just broadly, I guess, healthcare in general, but even, I guess, impact with patients that are using these drugs?
Yeah, no. So I know that I get questions from a lot of people like, hey, do you miss patient care? Do you miss clinical practice? Do you miss that part of pharmacy? And the truth is, yes, I really do. But while I did move on to industry, I feel like we do help influence patient care, but just in a bit indirect way. And I shouldn't say the word influence. I should just say we still have an impact there. And our impact is how we make sure the providers that we meet with are kept up to date on the most recent information, in an unbiased way, making sure they're educated appropriately. On the reverse side, taking in insights from those providers and taking those insights back to our internal team, that can influence, clinical trials, study design, determining maybe a new therapeutic area to be studied for a specific drug, things like that. And so while, we aren't as directly involved in patient care anymore, we still are involved just in a more, indirect way. But going back to the educational side of me, yes, I do love providing education. That is something that, fills my cup. And so since I get to have a role where I get to provide education to all kinds of healthcare providers, NPs, PAs, MDs, DOs, that's very fulfilling to me because I'm helping make sure that, they're kept up to date and I'm doing my job. And so that's very fulfilling.
Yeah, all good to hear. So let's say that someone has listened to this conversation so far and they're sort of sold on, I want to be an MSL. You mentioned earlier in the conversation that it is quite competitive and it may require advanced degrees, plural. So what advice would you have for someone aspiring to become an MSL? I guess just broadly, and then we'll sort of dig into some different things that you might mention.
Well, first things first, don't get discouraged because, like you said, it's very competitive. And I mean, you can send out lots and lots of job applications before you even hear back for an interviews. But you have to remember that you're not only, going up against people within your own, degree territory, but you're going up against, as a PharmD, I'm going up against PhDs, I'm going up against MDs, NPs, PAs. I know a couple of veterinarians who are fantastic. I mean, fantastic MSLs, occupational therapists who's an MSL. I also know an RN who was just promoted in a way to a national director position. And so that in itself is just, astounding. So you're in competition with so many people from so many different educational backgrounds who are all very, very qualified to do your job. So definitely take that into consideration first when you start applying for roles. But next, I think a great thing to kind of focus on is to think about yourself and what you can do to differentiate yourself from other candidates. So, like we kind of talked about earlier, that's one of the reasons why I decided to go back and get my MBA degree because I thought, that would help differentiate myself. And truthfully, I did talk about my MBA journey a lot during my initial interview with Eli Lilly. So, that was very helpful for me. Another thing that I think kind of makes me a bit different than other candidates is I'm a former collegiate athlete. I played college softball. And so I, kind of try to bring that into my interview as well, just to set myself up just a bit different, but also convey a lot of life lessons that I learned during that, like, discipline and, just the importance of teamwork and leadership, things like that. So, really, once you start applying for these roles, try to think about something that makes yourself stand out in a good and positive way. I think that's going to be very helpful. Another thing I did, I reformatted my CV, and I actually do have my actual CV on LinkedIn for anyone to view. And I think that reformatting of the CV, going from a clinically focused CV to an industry focused CV, I think that played a huge part in being more helpful, especially in getting those initial interviews. So really, if you're coming from a clinical background or an academia background, really strongly consider reformatting your CV to maybe a more condensed version, more straightforward version that's going to be more industry focused and what the hiring managers are looking for. So I think those are three kind of good first steps to take, and looking to break into the role. But truly, just try not to get discouraged. I know it's competitive, but it's totally worth it, to break into and all the hard work that goes into it.
Yeah, thanks. Jorge, did you have any follow-up?
Lots of different follow-up questions, but for the sake of time, just kind of as you were describing staying not getting discouraged, right? And so it's a great transition for one of the questions that I wanted to have. And maybe this sounds like an interview question, but can you tell us, I guess, maybe a time where it could be recent or whenever you started as an MSL that you had a failure that you thought, oh man, this didn't go so well, that in hindsight may have led to your success? Kind of putting you on the
Yeah.
spot with this.
Oh,
Hard-
that's no, that's a deep question. That's a good question though. And I actually do have one, but interestingly, it's not during my MSL career.
Sure.
And it kind of goes back to softball. So when I was in high school, and before that, I've played softball since I was 4. I love the sport. It was honestly how I identified myself. I absolutely loved it. I practiced, conditioning, whatever it was that revolved around softball. I was all in. I was all for it. Not just playing the game, but actually doing the work to get ready for the game. I just loved every aspect, and truly, it did kind of become a way like I said, defined who I was. And then I, got into college. I was very fortunate. I was recruited to play softball. And then once I got there, I realized that it wasn't exactly what I thought it was going to be like. And so I played my freshman year. I then transferred to ULM, played a year for ULM, so played through my sophomore year. And after that, I just decided, you know what? I think I might be done with softball. It's not exactly how I pictured it. I think I might, want to transition my focus to school. And, I was thinking about pharmacy school at the time, really wanting to get geared up for that. And so I decided to stop playing softball after my sophomore year. And that was a really hard decision. And of course, I looked at myself as a failure because I wanted to play all 4 years, which I didn't do. So, but at the time, I didn't realize it, of course, but that was a hugely impactful decision for my future career because while at the
Mhm.
time I was very sad, kind of dealing with the fact almost like I've lost my identity in a way, I'm not playing the sport that I love. I had to kind of redefine who I was and find a new area of focus for myself. And so after I finished my sophomore year, I got my pharmacy technician license and I started being a pharmacy technician for the remainder of my undergrad years, which was a great move looking back at it because it prepared me so well for pharmacy school, knowing about the medications, brand name, generic names, therapeutic class. I mean, that was a really good decision. And then it also helped me know going into pharmacy school that traditional retail was not the career path I wanted for myself. And there's nothing wrong at all with the traditional retail path. It's a great path and a much needed path. But I just knew for myself that's not the route I wanted to go. But I never would have known that if I hadn't done the pharmacy technician path after deciding to stop playing college softball. So while it was a very, kind of difficult time for me, it just led to such a great future career path because I knew I didn't want to go the retail path, I decided, well, I want to go the clinical path and I want to do a pharmacy residency. So I did that. Because of my pharmacy residency, I was introduced to the pharmaceutical industry and the MSL role. And then because of that, I eventually was able to transition into an MSL role myself. So very much a positive domino effect there that came out of a pretty sad situation for me. So definitely happy ending there. So that was good.
Thank you for sharing that. That's I'm sure a lot of listeners are going to be that's going to resonate with maybe some of the challenges that they had, and including myself. I felt like leaving academia after so many years and being involved in research. And I'll say, oh my gosh, I'm a failure. What am I doing? I love that you're sharing that because I think there's a lot of other people that may have similar stories, and maybe you could see that as a, hey, there's an opportunity as opposed to, oh, I failed at this. So thank you again for sharing that.
Yeah.
And so going back to you sharing a lot of resources for, and I know you post a lot for PharmDs, internships and so forth. How important is it for a PharmD? How important is it for somebody to have a fellowship in order to be able to break into the MSL role? Or do you see other PharmDs that have not done a clinical fellowship still break into the MSL role?
Oh, yes. So I definitely see, PharmDs from all types of background, retail backgrounds, hospital backgrounds, the clinical like AmCare background I kind of had break into the role. So it's definitely possible. But I think if you know early on that you want to go the industry path, the MSL pathway, doing a fellowship is just going to do nothing but help you and expedite the process. Because not only is doing a fellowship going to help you get great relationships with a pharmaceutical company wherever your fellowship is, it's just, it's just gonna really help make the transition a lot easier because in the fellowship you're getting the ins and outs of not only the MSL role but different roles within pharma. And so say if you wanted to go a different path, you have that option. So yeah, I think a fellowship is very important, but even if you don't have a fellowship, yeah, don't get discouraged because again, we've seen especially at the company I work for, we have so many NPs and PAs that are MSLs and they're phenomenal. I mean, they are set up so beautifully for this type of role with their clinical expertise and they're wonderful MSLs. So yes, if you're a pharmacist and you don't get a fellowship, yes, please don't get discouraged because whatever makes your pathway unique can, set you up beautifully for an MSL role down the future. So while fellowships are great, they're not essential, but they are very helpful.
Gotcha. Gotcha. No, that's very encouraging words. And I guess like, from what I'm getting is you're saying, hey, you got to tell your individual story and differentiate yourself. What's making you unique that you're going to be able to bring those skills back to the role, right? And speaking of
Right.
skills, I guess tell us a little bit of any new resources or anything that you've been reading that you might recommend that for other MSLs that are currently in the role or aspiring MSLs that they could use to help them be successful in the role.
Yeah, well, I you kinda mentioned the post earlier, but yes, so in a post I made several months ago, it was about AI tools, but definitely the one I use the most is NotebookLM. I mean, I'm telling y'all, that tool is just spectacular. You can throw any clinical trial paper or whatever you wanna throw in there, and it'll create a podcast for it, and then you can just listen to it while you're driving or while you're flying. I mean, it's just phenomenal. It really because coming into the MSL role, you are gonna travel a good bit, and those are difficult times to fill in with getting work done and learning because for example if I drive to Little Rock and back, that's going to be a 6-7 hour driving day for me and that's a lot of time for driving. And so now I can make the most of that by staying up to date with the most recent information. If a new phase 3 clinical trial was just approved for a competitor product or one of our own, I can just throw it in there, make a podcast and listen to it and be ready to go and ready to talk about it if I'm asked about it. I mean, I've actually done that before for KOL, meetings. I made a podcast, knew I was going to talk about it at the meeting, listened to it on the drive down there, and then was ready to go. So really, I think that tool just alone is just so beneficial for MSLs in particular with all the traveling we have to do.
Yeah, no, I agree. I use starting to implement the AI a lot more. And you do have a post, I believe, where the prompt that you actually use to develop those
Oh
podcasts.
yeah,
Yeah. And so
yes.
anyway, yeah. So you can tweak the post however you need to, but yeah. Joe, I know you're a fan of using AI as well, so I don't know if you want to have any follow-up questions on that or comments.
Just a comment. I think it sounds like a great use case. Time efficiency is something I always think about, and I don't know anybody who says they wish they had less time to do things. So having more time is always beneficial, or squeezing in some more of their work that they can on the move is good. I guess just in sort of as we start to wrap up, is there anything that we didn't talk about today so far that is you think important for someone to know, or anything that you wish you would have known before starting your current role?
Yeah, well, I know you asked one question earlier and I did not answer it, so I'd love to circle back and answer it now. But you asked why the dermatology therapeutic area, and that's actually a great question and something I really haven't touched on. So I chose the dermatology therapeutic area and rheumatology therapeutic area because I was applying to both, because that's where my expertise was. So I was the pharmacist for the rheumatology outpatient clinic, but I also covered the outpatient dermatology clinic, PRN. So those therapeutic areas and the medications and disease states and everything, that's where my expertise lied. And so that's where I decided to apply for my future roles. I do know some people who want to break into the MSL role and they, will just apply to any MSL role that they come across, regardless of the therapeutic area, regardless of the territory. And I think you're possibly not setting yourself up for the best success that way. Because if you apply for roles that you have your expertise in, like say it's, you give vaccines in the retail setting as a pharmacist, then I would definitely apply to vaccine MSL roles. Or, if you work at a hospital pharmacist setting and you deal a lot with, cardiometabolic type drugs or diabetes type medications, an AM care position, with a lot of diabetes type medications, definitely apply for diabetic type MSL roles. So really applying to roles that are geared towards your expertise, I think is going to set you up for, a lot of success. And then you want to highlight that expertise in your CV and your cover letter so the hiring manager knows, oh, well, this is what this person can bring to the table. And I think that's, very important. And then, kind of going back to the territory, I think, applying to MSL roles that are in the current territory where you're living is going to give you the best chance of success. Some pharma companies will, offer a relocation assistance, but some will not. But just when you're trying to break into the role, I think it's a really good practice to kind of narrow your search based on where your expertise lies and where you currently live. I think that'll probably give you the best, chance for success to hopefully get a position.
Yeah, great advice. Thanks so much. And Jorge may have a closing question, but just thanks so much for all that insight. I think people find it really helpful.
Yeah, no, I was just going to second Savannah's points on that. Now, Savannah, last I know we're getting to time right now, but last question for you: is it easier for somebody who's already an MSL? Let's say I'm in nephrology and I want to break into a dermatology MSL role, but as opposed to somebody who's new and that doesn't have any MSL experience.
Right. Oh my goodness. That's a great question. Honestly, I have to say it's all going to depend on the hiring manager because the hiring manager is going to hire who they want to want. And I know that honestly probably doesn't answer the question, but it's very true because
Yeah,
you
it's
have
true.
hiring managers who, want maybe a certain degree background. You want hiring managers who may want MSLs with previous experience. And then you have hiring managers who do want brand new MSLs who they can kind of shape and mold to the MSL they want them to become. So yeah, I really think it's dependent upon the hiring manager. I will say though, I think the hardest part of the MSL job is breaking into industry. To me, I just think that's the hardest hurdle to overcome because, like we said, it's so competitive. You're up against so many other people. But once you do break into that industry role, I think the ability for you to maybe move to a different role or maybe move to a different company, I think that step is a bit easier as compared to finally crossing the bridge and getting into industry.
Thank you so much, and I agree 100%. So, well, with that being said, if you guys have any questions, please reach out to us. Leave us a comment here on the podcast, or if you have particular questions for Savannah, reach out to her on LinkedIn. Thank you for sharing your insights. For those of you listening and watching the podcast, remember to stay curious, keep asking questions, and keep unraveling physiology and unraveling these different careers. Until next time, see you guys later.